Head over to miniaturemarket.com where they have thousands of board games at discounted prices, and you can sign up for product alerts. Dinner in Paris is a family-weight, economic, and abstract game for 2 to 4 players. We're going to be building all of these beautiful sculpted restaurants out on the board. On your turn, you might be gathering cards of different goods that will help you open up restaurants, or money that will help you put terraces out on those restaurants, enlarging them. So for example, you might need to pay 2 potatoes to open up this fry restaurant. But over the course of the game, you'll also be paying money to put out terraces to enlarge the restaurant. For example, this fryery has expanded around the band because whoever has the most terraces around the band this game is going to get a certain amount of points, depending if you're in 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th place, and depending on the amount of players. And each game has multiple goals players are fighting for, and each game these cards are different. You're also trying to complete other private and or public goals, like building terraces in a specific fashion to get positive points, or negative if you haven't done it by the end of the game if it was in your hand. And so you've been trying to get the most points by putting out restaurants, opening terraces, and doing different public and private goals. Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Dinner in Paris has great table presents with those awesome looking restaurants. It's a mix of set collection, economic, and an abstract puzzle with a unique feel. It feels familiar with the mechanisms, but also at the same time feels somewhat fresh as well. You're trying to efficiently work on multiple goals at the same time. You can block other players, so there's lots of interaction. You're dealing with both public and private goals, and there's different goals each game, so it's going to feel different. You're managing income versus points, and the scores are very tight regardless of which strategy you go down. Overall, again, it felt familiar, but still felt new and unique as well. It went on a little longer than I think a game of this depth should go on, and it can be AP prone, so playing with the full player count might be a little bit too long for what game it is, but overall the game was enjoyable and a fresh look at some of these mechanisms that are familiar to you. Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today we're going to be gathering different ingredients to open restaurants, increasing our income, and then expanding that restaurant to try to fulfill different goals. Today we're going to be having Dinner in Paris, and that is the name of this game. It's for 2 to 4 players, a family weight sort of Euro and economic style game. Let me show you how it's played. I'll see you on the other side. Here we have the board for Dinner in Paris. Now here is essentially the area of Paris of different streets, and these are the areas where restaurants can be built and terraces placed around the board. Now the restaurants that you'll be opening up throughout the game are actually these huge plastic sculpts, and this really adds to the table presence of the game when you're building these cool restaurants out onto the board. Now each player gets a player board. Now what you're trying to do is build restaurants and then build these terraces. Essentially they're sort of like, I think they're like sort of umbrellas that will have tables underneath them, and expanding the seating of your restaurants. And there's different types of restaurants. These correspond to the different buildings that I had just showed you. And over the course of the game, you're going to be building these by turning in resource cards to actually open up these different restaurants. I'll show you these cards in more detail in just a moment. Now when you do that, at the end of the game, you're going to get a certain amount of points depending on the restaurants that you've opened. So one main way to get points in this game is opening up restaurants. The other is to be placing terraces, which is taking these out and placing them next to the corresponding restaurants, at least in these categories. Now there's different categories of restaurants. Like here we have basically the fry place. There's 3 different restaurants in this category, 2 here and 2 here. So as you build terraces, you're going to be building out to the specific restaurants in that group. So if I built a terrace here, it's going to have to go and to attach to this restaurant. Now what this will do is over the course of the game, at the end of the game, the furthest right that you've built is how many points you'll get, and you can pretty much build up to more and more points, and they get more and more points as you go down a little bit to the top. But these ones tend to be more expensive to build, as I'll show you in just a moment. So one main way to score points is open up restaurants. The other is continuing to build terraces. those are two of the main ways to score in the game. I'll show you the other two main ways once we know a little bit more about the game. Now, on your turn, the first thing you'll do is you'll draw a card. Now, these are resource cards that are different sort of things that you'll need to open up the restaurants, as I showed you before, and some of them will be money, which will help you build those terraces. Now, when you take a card, you could take one from here, or you could take one from the top. If you take one from here, like this one can be either of these two goods, it will immediately get replaced. Everyone draws a card at the beginning of your turn, then you get 2 actions. And for those actions, one of the things you could do is get another card. So you could actually spend both of your normal actions to get cards, meaning you could actually get 3 cards on your turn. 1 for the mandatory card at the beginning, and 2 for here. And so you could just spend your turn just gathering cards. Now you do start with some cards at the beginning of the game, but let's say for an action we want to open this restaurant. This is what we need, 2 sets of potatoes, and let's say we had those. So we'd go ahead and discard these, and we could open up this restaurant. Now notice that it says X5, means there's only 5 of them in the game, and they are limited. Once they're all gone, nobody can build that one. Now when you build them, they're going to be going on this board in any open spot, but it will depend on the amount of players. For example, in a 4-player game, it'll always be this back row. 3-player game, it will be this row, and a 2-player game, it will be this row. There's also another side of the board that's only 2-player. Basically, it's the same board, it just looks a little bit more scaled down for 2 players. So let's say we take one of these, and we are going to build this restaurant. Let's say we're playing with 3 players, so it would go, we could put it anywhere, and as long as it's on the grid like that. Now, once we place that restaurant, we will also take the name of that restaurant with our color. We all have little tokens there. So everyone knows by looking at the board that this is the red player's building. So building a restaurant is one thing you can do on your turn. Another thing is building terraces. Now these cost a different amount. These ones cost 1. For each one, all the way up to here, you go left to right. But then when we get up to here, once we've built all these, it's 2. And then 3. And so they become more and more expensive as you go left to right, and they're more expensive as you go top to bottom. But now at the beginning of the game, everyone has 1 income. You can spend that each turn. So I can spend my 1 single income and put this here. This is going to gain us a point at the end of the game, but it's going to give us a terrace. So you're going to place that right next to your restaurant to start off with like this, and then you're going to be able to start going off from here as you build multiple terraces. You're going to be going off adjacent to that into different ways. So maybe if I had a lot more money or on future turns I start to build more terraces, we could do things like this. Now, I built over this on purpose. This is a band, and there's another band on the other side of the board. Another main way to get points is at the end of the game for different goals. Like this one says the most terraces around bands, and that's all the way around the bands. Right now I already have 3 around this one. There's another one on the board on the other side, but at the end of the game, depending on the amount of players, you'll get a certain amount of points if you're in 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th place, depending on the amount of players. For example, in a 3-player game, if you're first, you'll get 12 points. 2nd place, 6. 3rd place gets 0. And you'll do that for each of these 3 goals, like the most terraces around bands, the most terraces in the Rue Nord area, and the board is essentially set up into different quarters. So there's actually 4 different quadrants here, and the Rue Nord is up here. So that means this entire half, whoever has the most terraces there will get that other bonus. And whoever has the most sort of income at the end of the game will get that one. So 3 different goals there. That's another main way to get points in the game. Now also as you're building, you might be able to cover up these different pigeons. And so you'll draw one of these cards each time you do that, and they do different things. Like immediately you could draw 2 resource cards, or maybe when you want to use it, you can get 2 coins to use it. This one immediately you place an additional terrace in the same restaurant for free. Or maybe you can place terraces adjacent to other players' restaurants, and you can cover up to 2 of theirs. Because this tends to be a battle, because as other players are building buildings and terraces, you can never place one right next to it. So for example, neither player can place a terrace right here unless you have that other card where you could actually build here and build over people, because you're going to be sort of trying to cut others off. Like I'm starting to cut this person off from this going around this band for that goal that we talked about. So it does get to be a little bit confrontational where you're trying to push other people out of areas that you don't want them to go into. Now another action you can take on your turn is to complete a goal. Now everyone is given 2 goals at the beginning of the game. They keep one secret and they place one up here. So those are the exact amount of the cards from the amount of players there. Now this one here says you'll get 4 points if you're able to make your terraces look like this. Now it can be flipped in any way. So this section here actually matches that. So I could get this. This will be face up in front of me, and I'll get 4 points at the end of the game. Now since it's a public goal, it doesn't get replaced. But if this was one that was secret in my hand, I could, for an action, show that I've got this, leave it face up, and then I draw another one of these cards, and I would decide whether to keep it privately If I do, I'll have to get this done by the end of the game. If so, it's 5 points. If not, it's minus 5 points. Or if I don't want this, I can put it back in the sort of public area, if you will. And there's all sorts of different goals, like 5 terraces around the fountain, or you could place 3 terraces for each restaurant category. So there's all sorts of tons of different goals that you can go for throughout the game. So just to summarize, on your turn, you're taking a card and then doing 2 actions, and those can be taking cards, putting out restaurants, putting out terraces, or completing goals. Now, as the game goes on, I didn't show you this yet, but as you open restaurants and as you get certain places, you'll get more income. So as the game goes on, and let's say you've placed a few of these restaurants, your income's going to go up. So over the course of the game, your income's going to be going up, and each round you get to spend these, and there's another cube that you can use to sort of track your income, how much you've spent each round. So you're going to be building up income, which gets you better restaurants, which gets you more income and more points, and it's sort of a little bit of engine building as well. And you'll continue doing this until either a certain amount of restaurants is built, depending on the amount of players, like in a 3-player game, 13 restaurants, or players placed all their terraces from 2 different restaurant categories, or if there's no other place to place restaurants legally or terraces. So you'll pretty much be filling up the board before the game ends most of the time. And again, at the end of the game, you're going to get points for the restaurants that you've built. You're going to get points for how far you've built out terraces everywhere, any of those different bonus goals, again, to first, second, third place for any in each of those, and any of the actual goal cards. Remember, minus if you had them and you didn't complete them, and whoever has the most points at the end is the winner. All right, now this game, let's start with it, has great table presence. All of those plastic sculpted restaurants are really cool. They're kind of like little Legos, the way that the tops go on each other and things like that, but it looks really cool on the table with all those different restaurants being set up on the board. Now this game has a lot to do with set collection of cards, and it has an economic aspect where you're trying to gain income and then use that income as efficiently as possible. And there's also sort of that abstract puzzle nature, and all of that comboing together into what I feel like is a game that feels somewhat familiar with the mechanisms that are there, but at the same time it's a unique sort of mix of these different things, and I like that aspect of it. You're really trying to efficiently work on multiple goals simultaneously, and so everything you do is like, this is going to push me towards this and maybe this, and maybe push them away from that. And you're trying to figure out what actions can you take that will do as many different things as possible. And it's a fun little puzzle to figure out. And because of all those goals and such are different each game, and it's going to work differently depending on what other players are doing on the board as well. So the game, the board state is going to change how things work and things like that. But I like that you're really trying to figure out what can I do most efficiently now to try to gain a foothold in as many different things as possible. I like that there's an aspect of sort of blocking others' terraces where it's like, oh, I'm gonna go over here real quick, so you're gonna have to probably go all the way around me if I don't keep building just to get to that, that lamp that you wanna go around for one of the goals or such. So I like that there is a sort of there's a lot of player interaction on the board of what you're doing and what the others are doing. You're constantly watching the state of the board. I like those public and private goals. Again, much like the drawing the cards feels like Ticket to Ride, so does this. So that private goals, and you get them, you get the points or minus points if you don't get them done. And I like how they get replaced, where it's like if you get a public goal done, it doesn't replace. But if you finish a private goal, you get to draw a card and either keep it as private or put it out as a public goal. I like that. That's sort of a different sort of mechanism I hadn't seen before. And it worked really well with how many goals are going to be out there throughout the different game, and a little bit of pressure of luck where it's like, ooh, I can keep this goal, but it's getting kind of late, and if I can't get this by the end of the game, I'm going to get minus points. Similar feelings to sort of those private goals in Ticket to Ride, if you will. And all those goals are different. So there's different, there's both your private and public goals that are different, but there's also the majorities that are very different each game too, whether it's you need to have a certain amount of terraces in a certain area, or going around the band, or go around all the way around have the most around the fountain and things like that. So there's always going to be different things that you're going for goals, which will change your strategies in the game and make each game feel different. I like that you're trying to manage your income, but you're also trying to manage your income versus points, because it's like, oh, if I bring restaurants up and I open restaurants, it's going to allow me to get more income. And sometimes when I put terraces up, I'll gain income too, but mostly you're doing that for the points, and you're trying to manage all your income each turn to how do I leverage that into either quicker, even more income, or how do I leverage that into points towards the end of the game. The game has, it's balanced really well. So there's tight scores even with different strategies. You can take, one strategy where you're just building up a bunch of these restaurants, maybe the best one and a bunch of the other bigger ones, and then building up some terraces and getting points that way. Or maybe you're just really focusing on all the goals, and it doesn't matter which way you go. The scores tend to be pretty tight in this game. It's well balanced. Now, on the negative side of things, the game itself, it has it's a little longer than I think it needs to be. I'm always on the side of like, if a game had to be a little too long or a little too short, which would you rather? I'd rather it get over a little shorter, wanting you to want more, wanting you to put more pressure on you towards the end. And here the game goes on, I think, just a little too long, where some of the end game conditions makes it so that the board has to be almost completely full by the time it's done. I'd like it to feel a little more tense throughout the game, as opposed to just towards the end it didn't feel quite as tense, because a lot of the sort of footholds were there for certain players. It's just a matter of things happening. Not the end of the world, but just a little nitpick there. Also, the game definitely there's a lot to think about. Goals and cards and money and terraces and all these different things. So, and especially since what the player does before you can change what you want to do. So the game can have some sort of analysis paralysis there. And for that reason, even with 2, it's somewhat noticeable, but you're also usually thinking 2. But I would definitely think, I'd say that this game it's definitely better with less than 4 players, because of the amount of downtime that can happen when you're thinking through all these different things and rethinking once something else happens when it becomes your turn. But overall, this game is fresh and unique. It uses a lot of familiar things that will go, you'll play it and it will feel familiar to you, but at the same time it's going to feel different as well. So if you're looking for that sort of 45 minute to an hour sort of medium weight, sort of not necessarily a gateway game, but like a next step game that has a pretty cool theme and some good, some table presence, then Dinner in Paris is going to be one you're going to want to check out. This has been the Game Boy Geek, breaking down barriers, growing relationships through board games, and helping you on the next one you'll love.
Lucky Duck Games has 4 new games available now. In the Court of Miracles, you lead a guild of beggars, scheme with sinister plots, and use trickery to build your own renown in an attempt to take over 16th century Paris. Baron Voodoo is an abstract strategy game involving the collection of thematic soul dice, and it made my top 10 most anticipated releases at Essen Spiel this year. Kingdom Rush Rift in Time is a tower defense with epic heroes that includes a campaign and an infinite replayability mode. It was hugely popular on Kickstarter, raising over $1 million. Chronicles of Crime 1400 is a standalone follow-up to the award-winning Chronicles of Crime, where you'll be solving 4 unique crimes in medieval Paris. These are all available in stores now, and you can learn more and order them at luckyduckgames.com.